Our next speaker, Alexandria Shaner, you heard from her just a couple minutes ago. She's going to be speaking about what to demand from the media. She's a znetwork.org staffer and a writer for Extinction Rebellion, amongst other organizing things. Alexandria, please take it away.
Thank you. So what to demand from the media? First, I'd like to start with briefly clarifying what is propaganda versus what is independent media, and what roles do they fill in society respectively, control versus social infrastructure. Then we can talk about what we want and what we can do about getting it. So what is the media and what do we want it to be? Through ZNet and via my work with grassroots movements like Extinction Rebellion, I consider a free independent media to be part of our social infrastructure. And what do I mean by this? A free and independent media is absolutely essential for ensuring that democracy can exist, let alone that it can be vibrant, transparent, and responsive to the needs of the people. It really provides a foundation for informed communities, checks on governmental and corporate power, and it fosters a dynamic society where all voices can be heard. So without a free independent media, the mechanisms of democracy are weakened and citizens are at the mercy of misinformation and manipulation, which sounds like a sadly familiar situation, yeah? So if media is social infrastructure, what should it actually look like? To put it positively, we can envision and demand a media system that empowers the public, supports democratic engagement, holds power accountable, rather than reinforcing interests of the elites. And I really want to drive home this function of the media in terms of power. Media should be a system of information sharing that serves the people by empowering them to deliberate and make decisions, both as individuals and collectively. But our current mass media, and even much of the so-called alternative media, is instead a system of information sharing that is funded by and serves the powerful. It consolidates their control and facilitates the maintenance of their domination. So another word for this is propaganda. It's important that we start this discussion by clearly making this structural distinction. Now that we've defined the media in terms of what it needs to be for a functioning democracy, a little more on what I mean by propaganda. One example that we'll hear more about later tonight is how it came to be that millions of Americans now passionately believe that immigrants are the main threat to their livelihoods and to their loved ones, while billionaires pose no threat, even though this is easily disproved by facts, by history, and even by our own daily experiences. So thank you, propaganda. Propaganda refers to these ways in which powerful institutions manipulate information to serve their interests and maintain control over public opinion. And it's operating through our mass media, acting as a mechanism of control rather than a neutral provider of information. And I want to also point out that it's not just about outright lies, but rather about selectively framing information and omitting certain facts, and focusing on particular narratives that maintain the status quo or serve the interests of the powerful. So again, this all sounds really familiar, right? It is not new at all, though I think the public consciousness of this dynamic has become much more prevalent in recent years. All right, so we've defined what we want the media to be: free and independent in the service of a democratic society, as well as defined what we have now, which is a propaganda model in the service of elite domination. So let's just take a quick minute before we talk about our demands and what we want to do about it to situate ourselves in this current moment and apply this propaganda model that has long served our capitalist democracy, and look at recent changes as we move towards more increased and overt authoritarianism, and consider how this is changing the media landscape. There's two things that I really want to focus on tonight, which is the consolidation of ownership and the increased repression. Consolidation of ownership of the media and the loss of the local press is also absolutely not new, not something that began with this Trump administration. It's been increasing and exponentially so in recent decades. What is new is that this exponential trend in consolidation of control has now reached a point where we're seeing that it is becoming no longer possible to pretend that this consolidation is not a fact. Public consciousness is becoming well aware of the corporate and billionaire control of media, and we're seeing changes in tactics for using the media as a propaganda machine to achieve the same results in terms of control. So the media as a tool of soft power is now being wielded in much less subtle ways. For example, you may have seen that Jeff Bezos recently announced sweeping changes at the Washington Post, which he owns, where the opinion page will now only run op-eds that promote two pillars: personal liberties and free markets. So the paper that once advertised itself with the slogan "Democracy dies in darkness" is now explicitly and openly pro-oligarchy. As a little side note, Amazon, of course, does operate as a monopoly, which means it's antithetical to the free market, though somehow we should expect that that analysis to escape the new writers who are going to be brought in to form opinion at the Post. But really what's new is that the paper's billionaire owner is explicitly dictating the editorial direction. Now, when Bezos says that viewpoints opposing these pillars will be left to be published by others, who does he mean? Where does he mean? The New York Times, Twitter, publishing outlets with the biggest circulation are now all owned by members of the billionaire class. And that's really why independent outlets and journalists are needed now more than ever to provide a counterweight to this oligarch media, to make sure that topics and perspectives that actually serve the empowerment of people are presented and disseminated. Now, alongside this hyper consolidation of ownership, we now also have an accompanying surge in repression. And this is the tactic that is being increasingly relied upon to get the public to go along with the consolidation of the ownership of the media. So basically, if propaganda is no longer cutting it, we're going to use fear as the mechanism of control. I'm just looking at the time. I have a bunch of examples of some recent repression and considerations around free speech, but I'm going to keep that. If you want to hear more, ask in the questions. But basically, I won't subject you to that. You've probably seen it in your feeds. It's been horrific out there. And again, none of this is really new, neither the corporate consolidation of ownership nor the repression. The shift that we need to notice is that as the illusion of an independent or free media is abandoned, there is now a need for more repression and the use of fear as a tactic of control to get us all to go along with it. All right. Now I want to talk about opportunities. So yes, we're facing a serious moment of increased corporate and authoritarian control of the media, and of the increased repression that goes hand in hand with it. But this shift is also an opportunity. Anytime there's a major rupture in the status quo, there is space opened up for something new. Whether that will be something good or something bad is where our agency and our action is urgently needed. So what can we do? I'm going to quickly propose a simple stop, think, and act framework that really anyone can tap into. So to start with, stop. Do not participate in or add to the chaos. This 24-hour news cycle and now the nanosecond by second drip feed of content that follows us around via our phones is engineered to keep us stressed out and hyper vigilant, yet also chronically underinformed, isolated, feeling paralyzed by exhaustion, dread, apathy. So please take control of your daily sensory intake by assessing what it is doing for you and making any necessary changes that you see fit. Second is share responsibly, whether it's unverified scare posts about ICE raids or doom scrolling and posting. I think it's helpful if we resist the urge to engage and share unless it's verified and constructive content. Our current media ecosystem is absolutely engineered to keep you outraged and distracted and to sow chaos. So let's not help them out. They don't need our help. Instead, we can focus on building collective resilience. And I'm so glad to hear my fellow panelists talk about mutual aid tonight. We did not coordinate this, so that just shows you like how powerfully each of us from diverse perspectives are coming to this conclusion. When oppressive systems are used to isolate and exhaust us, carrying this heaviness together is an act of defiance. So this, in terms of media, might mean creating tangible support structures like rotating leadership roles in your community organizations, establishing local mutual aid networks, and building community systems, communication systems that don't rely solely on privately owned social media platforms, and even taking turns monitoring political developments so that everyone has a chance to rest. All right, so that's stop. Now we're going to get to think. Once you're ready to re-engage with the media, you, and by that I mean actually each and every one of us, have what it takes to empower ourselves and each other to engage critically by developing our own critical literacy skills. I'd like to present the concept of critical media literacy, which is really the backbone of our editorial policy at ZNet. So not to imply that you all need to go out and become editors and journalists, but to underline that you not only can we all engage critically with the media, but that it is our right to do so and our civic responsibility to do so. So critical literacy, really briefly, is the ability to read, analyze, and question the world, particularly through the lens of power and justice. So it's going beyond simply understanding the texts of news and media, and involves recognizing and challenging the social, political, and economic forces that shape the production of knowledge and influence all of our lives, which is empowering us to become active participants in actually transforming our society. In terms of media, it equips us with the tools to think deeply and independently about the media that we consume. It helps us resist manipulation, understand underlying biases, make more informed decisions about the information that we accept, share, and then act upon. So again, these are skills that journalists and editors are supposed to develop, but really these are skills that everyone should recognize and develop. They should be taught in schools, but surprise, surprise, increasingly they are not, precisely because they are so powerful. They are not unlearnable, however, quite the opposite. So continually developing our critical literacy will empower us in all aspects of our lives, and it's something we can all do. And then when you reach out and develop them with friends, coworkers, and families, you're actually creating empowered communities. And this skill is just essential for the functioning of any kind of free independent media and generally for the health of democratic societies. Now, how actually to apply a critical lens to your media intake, again, due to time constraints, I'm not going to go through a more in-depth guide that I've prepared, but we will publish it on ZNet and make it accessible to you if that's something that you're interested in and want to follow up on. Now, finally, to conclude, number 3, after stop, think, we're going to go to act. How can we develop and support independent media? So the question I was asked to address is, what should we demand of the media that we engage with? And I began this discussion with a summary of how we can envision what a free independent media would look like. And this is exactly what we should demand of any media claiming to represent that. In this moment, a few quick demands that are very, very specifically worth highlighting are 1, media should be correcting the lies and propaganda. Number 2, it should be actually questioning authority and contesting power rather than engaging in the false divides that the mainstream media presents to us. So, for example, a really common example, the choice between, say, CNN versus Fox News is not a real choice. Both of these outlets are beholden to the billionaire class, and that billionaire class is who we need to resist unified, not divided. These false divides are designed to polarize and disempower the public, and independent media should not simply accept or repeat the official narratives promoted by governments, powerful individuals, and corporations. Instead, it should critically examine and challenge the actions and policies of those in power, holding them accountable to the public. Independent media should also raise the visibility of resistance efforts that aren't trying to just return to the previous status quo, which, as we've seen, is not the solution, but rather what led us here in the first place. Independent media should bring out perspectives that the mainstream media leaves out. This is a question of who deserves to be heard. We should be platforming climate activists, frontline communities, local journalists on the ground in places like Gaza and Congo, workers, women, generally people affected by decisions, not just the decision makers and influencers. Media should be empowering action. So we shouldn't just be talking about everything that's going wrong. We should be presenting practical ways that people can get involved in resistance, giving the information that people need to make up their own minds and then act upon it. It should be encouraging informed public debate. So providing the public with the tools and knowledge necessary to engage in meaningful political and social debate. And then finally, like super obvious and easy, but incredibly important, independent media should prioritize public interest over profit and be free from corporate and government influence. Full stop. So beyond these demands, when we do find independent media projects that we value—
we got if we can wrap up real quick, please.
Oh yeah, sure. Basically, if we do find independent media projects that we value, we need to support them. So I know everyone says this, but you should donate financially or in other material ways. We talked about already sharing responsibly, and I'll just end with participate. Media is no different from anything we've already talked about. Contribute if you have something to say, send in your words, discuss with your friends, build community, and just really stand up and be vocal in support of those experiencing repression, because fear only works when we give into it. Silence and appeasement have absolutely never worked to stop a bully, let alone dictators. So you don't need to do everything or even the biggest thing. Just start where you are, do what you can in your own ways, and keep making efforts to connect with others as you're doing it.
Thank you, Alexandria. A lot of positive comments in there. Catherine says she could listen to a lot more of you. We have a million versions of the same question for you, Alexandria. I bet you can guess what it is. Where do we go for the good news? If you could, because we have to move on, if you could type a couple out and put it in the chat and make sure you send it to everyone. Some people were even asking specifically about like Substack and people like that. So if you could post some outlets in the chat, that would go a long way. And just separately, you started, it was so funny to me. You started out talking about the news, how they leave things out. They repeat what they want and they omit what they don't want. Um, I believe that's the first chapter of Norman's new book, War Made Invisible, is called Repetition and Omission. So it's like really how they do it is they repeat the stuff they want you to think, and they never say the things they don't want you to think. Pretty simple strategy, really, but yeah, that stuck out to me. Um, Again, reminder, everyone, znetwork.org. Alexandria, please share that link as well, and please check that out.